everybody that supports the show. Shout out to Riton Optics, 6 Hour, and all the other brands that support the show continuously. We got a special guest today, probably the best guest for our industry. There's no question. A lot of questions flying around, a lot of question marks. Everybody wants all the answers. He's the man of the hour. We got the one and only Larry Keene from NSSF. What's up, Larry?
How you doing? Things are good.
Barely hanging in there. Everybody's curious right now where this is going to go and how this is going to play out. Let's dive right in. As of right now, is SHOT Show on?
Game on. SHOT Show's happening.
All right. Well,
as simple as that. We get asked that question literally every day. The SHOT Show is happening. The only way the SHOT Show doesn't happen is if the government says you can't have the show. But otherwise, we're going to do everything we can to make it safe and enjoyable. So are our partners in Vegas, the Sands, the Venetian, Palazzo. But there'll be policies we have to follow and make sure everybody is safe. But the show is happening. And by the way, it'll be the 50,000 more square feet of exhibit space in the show. So we're going forward. We're planning on having a show.
Now, I don't have to tell you, Larry, that the industry obviously, has a little bit of nerves in the whole deal here as to whether or not it'll happen. People have brought up concerns. SEMA got canceled. I've told everybody the same thing. We got still a little bit of a ways to go here with SHOT, and I do believe it's going to 100% happen. I don't think they're going to close Vegas again from what I'm hearing from Sisolak, and I got my ear to the street a little bit. I think it's going to happen. The question everybody has is how we're going to have a measure of safety. Is there going to be masks available, which I'm sure there logistics standpoint?
So, masks, the facility says masks are required. We'll have masks. I'm sure people will have their, exhibitors will have their own logoed masks.
Sure.
Masks will be required. There'll be hand sanitizer galore. You'll be swimming in it. And we'll be water wells to control, the flow of traffic. So we have social distancing. I suspect that we'll probably have a smaller crowd just because some people won't feel comfortable coming, but that's fine. That's their choice. But there'll be temperatures taken, as you come through. Those devices that read the body temperature to try to be safe, and that it's all in the process of evolving and being planned out. We'll have to obviously do whatever's required by the health officials in Nevada, the governors, whatever orders are in place, as well as what the building requires for its own purposes, right? So we're working very closely with our partners, and they're committed to having the show. We just received a letter the other day from Steve Hill, who runs the Las Vegas Visitors and Convention Bureau.
Yeah.
Saying, look, they value the show. It's an important part of the economy for the state and for Vegas, and they are committed to, as are all our partners, Convex, the Sands, Venetian, Freeman, who helps us produce the show, are committed to having a safe environment, as safe as it could possibly be, and the show is going to happen. As you mentioned, there are like 6 months until the show. We've only been in this COVID thing, for about the number of cases coming down. So we're confident at this point that the show is going forward, and we're planning accordingly. And so our exhibit square footage the show has ever had, and we are essentially sold out. So it's happening.
In a roundabout way, Larry, and you never like to say this, do you feel like it might be a good thing in some ways because it's going to weed out some of the people, the pretenders that come to the show, the people you've been trying to weed out for years indirectly? Do you feel like this is a good opportunity to kind of thin the herd a little bit?
I think we'll see that. It's my expectation that fewer tire kickers are there, and the quality of the attendee will be the most popular sort of feedback we get from exhibitors are there are too many non-qualified attendees, not buyers, and they want the buyers there because it's a trade show. They're there to do business. So I think those numbers will probably be down, I suspect, up until October. But, the space is sold out. I mean, we're going to have the biggest show ever.
Yeah, the way sometimes I explain it to people, Larry, right or wrong, I try to get them to understand, because I get friends that come for the first time and they want to have the experience. They're like, there's a lot of like the same booths. And I'm like, it would be nice if there was a little bit of a criteria. I know people got to go on a list and everything else, but do we really need 47 booths that with the same, pouch for sale? It starts to become, inundated with fluff. And I think this is where that opportunity kind of comes up to kind of thin it a little bit. And I've said it to people, and I want to get your thoughts on it. A little bit of it might have to do with the model to which the NSSF and the venue and how they pay for things. It's like trading time for money. It's selling booth space for money. And I'd love to see them get to more of a streaming video audio model where people can experience the SHOT Show from afar via streaming or audio or video. And I'm just not sure. I don't have the answer as to why that hasn't been implemented yet.
Well, I'm not responsible for running the SHOT Show. There's plenty of video online, through SHOT Show TV and others. But there's a lot to be said for that face-to-face interpersonal interaction. And, as in terms of what, how many booths are with what products, the market sorts that out, right?
Of course.
That's competition. So we let the market work. We're firm believers, in the market economy. So we don't try to say, well, you can't come because we've already got 6 of those products. Let the market decide. People compete on price and quality. But I don't see us ever going to an entirely virtual in the trade show space in the past, and it really hasn't worked very well because people want to touch, feel, and see the product. It's a little bit different than just seeing it, entirely virtual or through Zoom, which, or Skype or whatever, which we've all become very accustomed to using lately.
Right.
More than we ever did before. But I don't see us ever, completely going virtual. And that model really hasn't been particularly successful. Because people want that interaction.
There's definitely limitations for sure. Before we change gears completely, there's a, are we going to see kind of the last question around SHOT Show? Are we going to see a pared down SHOT Show in terms of events and what I would call like, the pre-SHOT Show events upstairs and maybe some of the learning experience stuff? Are we going to see that stuff pared down, or is it full go, all in 100%? Is there any type of scale that you're going to implement, or how do you see logistically? Is it going to be 100%, 80%, 50%?
Well, we don't control what exhibitors do, during the show in terms of events they do off property. That's entirely up to them. We are still planning a full menu of seminars, which is critical. It's very important. A lot of people come primarily for the seminars, particularly law enforcement buyers. That's an important attraction for them. So we're planning to have a full slate of webinars, or not webinars, but seminars held in. Yeah, I mean, some of the other social events might change. We're sort of working through all of that, but the show itself is, again, SHOT Show is happening unless the government says you can't.
Now,
and it's just that simple.
I think it's incredibly critical, and I'm going to give you my 2 cents on it. I think you're in a very pivotal crossroads, the NSSF is, in a good way. I think you guys have potential with this to set the tone for the whole year more so than you ever have. We both are we're all in agreement. I know your whole camp and probably everybody in my camp that, this is going to blow over a big chunk in November, and certainly if we get some level of a cure, right? So the hope is that this starts to dissipate a little bit, and we have SHOT Show. But it puts the NSSF in a very unique position that you can't ignore, Larry, as becoming a tremendous leader, as if you're not already, in the space, because you're going to set the tone for the whole year. And with some of the disarray over at NRA, with them fighting, a ton of battles that they got to deal with, it's on their plate, that's their headache. But you guys are in a unique space in a sense that this is going to set everything for the year. Do you feel the pressure of that, and how do you think that plays?
We are not the NRA. We are not going to, we're a trade association, so we're not looking to try to become, a consumer-focused organization. That's not our mission. We try to, we have to stay focused on our mission, but clearly, with the challenges that are going on in this attack, this lawsuit by the New York Attorney General, we're going to continue to do what we do on the legislative front, the policy front, and the public affairs front. And so maybe our voice gets louder in some way, but that's fine. And we welcome that challenge and that responsibility, if you will. I do agree that 2020, I expect, is going to be the biggest year ever. And going into 2021, I think if Biden is elected or the Senate flips or both, sales are going to continue to be very strong. I think they're going to accelerate even from where they are now, if that's possible, and is never ever in the history of the industry. And I think even if Trump is reelected and or the Senate doesn't flip, I think sales will continue to be very strong right on into 2021 because sadly, I expect there'll be a lot of unrest from the left if they don't prevail in the election. I think they're, I say facetiously or jokingly, the left is going to lose what's left of their mind. So if they don't win in November, and so I think that, and I think that's the sense I get from talking to people in the industry. They think sales are going to be really strong, and 21 is going to be a great year. And every year starts off really with the SHOT Show. So again, it's on, and it's going to be bigger than ever. So
yeah, I think you're right. I think it puts you in a unique space in the sense that you can become the model, right, for the rest of the year that people are going to follow, whether it's SCI, whether it's the NRA show, and so on and so forth. That if pulled off, if the team pulls off a spectacular SHOT Show and is able to capture the attention, saying we can do this, we can do a large scale show, we can support our industry, it's going to go for miles. Now the problem, as you brought up, and it is a problem because I've talked to enough executives around the industry, as you know, that we can't keep up right now. You can't make a bullet fast enough. And the problem we're running into is guys are scared guys and gals are scared as to where to put their money, where to put their energy. Everybody has a little bit of paralysis, both in their marketing departments and in their ops departments, as to kind of what the next thing is. I know companies, and I'm not going to name them, very, very big companies, that they're 3 months out, they're 4 months out in production in terms of getting product out there. What advice? I mean, I know you're not on the manufacturing floor, Larry, but I see this growing too. And how much do you scale up, and how much do you manage all that scalability, and how do you keep up with? I mean, we're seeing double-digit NICS checks, triple-digit NICS checks. I mean, what are these guys supposed to do? I go in gun stores; they're bare. Where do you advise them? Where do they even begin? Because I know you talk to everybody.
Well, I look at the July numbers, and I was really stunned because I'm thinking to myself, what are they buying? The shelves are empty. And I've talked to probably many of the same folks you have. A lot of people got burned in 2016, right? They bet on Hillary winning and thinking they would be a boon, and that didn't happen. So I think there's a little bit of reluctance to go, all in because you don't know what's going to happen. The biggest challenge that I've heard on the manufacturing side is on the ammunition side, it's primers, getting enough primers, particularly for smaller ammunition manufacturers. And it's labor, being able to get enough labor because, they want to be very careful to keep COVID out of their factories because it could shut everything. Or they were exposed, they can't come to work, or if they've got to take care of a kid or something like that. So on the manufacturing side, labor, I've been asked a lot, is it raw material? Is it raw material? And that's not the on the to the manufacturers to assemble. And it's obviously, it goes from production through assembly, packaging, and right onto the truck and out the door. There's like literally no inventory sitting around of really anything. Lines in front of factories, they're trying to hire more people. So they are staffing up. They're trying to add more, more shifts, working, weekends, nights. A little bit like they did back in 2013 after Sandy Hook and 2016. So you see a lot of that, people working overtime, people working extra shifts. It takes a while to add actual capacity, more machines and get them set up. So, that into the future, certainly through the election, demand outstripping capacity or supply. And I think people are trying to be careful and not, chase the demand, and then when it stops, they get, they're find themselves in a tough position. So it's a little bit of slow and steady wins the race. But the demand is incredible. Never seen anything like it.
Yeah, one suggestion I made to one very large holster company in Arizona, you probably know, is they can't get enough people to help them. They can't hire enough people. They would hire the next 10 people through their door, but more people are making money at home on unemployment, so that's part of the struggle. The flip side is, I said, what about going to the NSSF and having SHOT Show on some level, maybe it's on the bottom floor, having a bit of almost like a job fair, having companies have the ability to list open jobs, and if people come and want to participate in the firearms business or defense business, have the ability maybe to submit their resume. I don't know the solution, but I know workforce is an incredibly huge problem right now, and it would be interesting if there was some level of curation of maybe resumes or people interested in applying, and that's something I know that the NSSF does do, because you do a job listing. Is there any thoughts to put a booth or something, a courtesy booth, have somebody there maybe to collect resumes or sit with people?
There's been no discussion about that, and frankly, there isn't any place to put it. We're completely sold out. We do have, and the people that come to the show already have jobs in the industry.
Right.
So we do have the jobs board on our website. So people are interested in getting into the industry and looking for jobs. That's a great place to go, because we encourage companies to post their jobs or open jobs there.
Yeah, and LinkedIn is a great tool.
You obviously contact your local manufacturer, distributor, or whomever about job opportunities, because they're out there, no question about it. I mean, I drive past the Ruger factory in New Hampshire periodically, and they've got signs outside, hiring, hiring, hiring.
Yeah, it's interesting how the workforce piece will play out, because I know that with the unemployment, it's hard to get somebody to come off the sidelines and work when they're making more sitting at home. That's just going to be a struggle right now in getting people in. So, I make suggestions to brands all the time, whether it's offering incentives or small bonuses or maybe a relocation bonus. But we have to rethink everything, right, Larry? This is forcing everybody to rethink everything. And I know we spoke at the beginning of COVID. Now, as we're in the throes of this, has you and your team, talked about this? I mean, this has forced everybody to re-examine how they do everything outside of the show space, particularly in media and particularly in how we approach things, even with the government.
Yeah, I mean, the world has gone, work from home largely. I mean, obviously not the manufacturers. The idea that people are making more money sitting home, that's certainly a discussion about, the next COVID package Congress passes. The Republicans want to reduce that amount so that you don't have people making more money sitting at home. And, just in my own life and in talking to small business owners in my community, I hear that as an issue. In talking to the manufacturers, it's been part of the discussion, or part of the issue, in terms of the labor shortage, but it's also, or more importantly, it's, just making sure people are safe, aren't bringing it into the factory, or they can't work because they got exposed and things like that. So, but I think you're going to see eventually some deal that reduces the amount of the benefit to incentivize people to go back to work.
Yeah.
So that's, as you just watch the news, that's a big part of the debate. But everything has changed, pretty significantly, and I'm thinking a large measure. A lot of the changes are going to be permanent. Right? I mean, people have learned that they can work efficiently from home. We've certainly experienced that ourselves, where everybody at our office in Connecticut, essentially for a long period, was working from home, and we really didn't miss a beat. People adapted. We had put in place the IT infrastructure to support that, and while our offices opened up, there are still restrictions on how many people can come, and then there are, sensitivities. People are concerned about going into that kind of work environment and whether they increase their exposure. You mentioned earlier that, after November, things will probably change. I think, you always hear about, the October surprise, which, for distribution that is, effective, or at least partially effective, might come out. I think that could change the political dynamic, even if person you got to scale up to get 330 million doses, right? So to the whole country, but that can have an impact. And I've heard a lot of people say that a lot of this debate about COVID and how to respond to it has become politicized and partisan. So I know some people who think after November, and particularly if Biden were to win the White House, that a lot of the partisanship ends, and all of a sudden, everything will be under control, and the kids will be back in school by Thanksgiving.
No chance.
Remains to be seen. So, but we believe that we can do a safe and responsible event, and we're committed to doing that. The SHOT Show in January, which again is many, many months away. Think about how different things were just 2 or 3 are now, and how much things have changed even in the past month, from like skyrocketing numbers to where now you start to see the infections come down. The death rate never spiked commensurate with the increase in cases. They're learning how to treat it better, and the more they learn about the virus, the better they get at managing it. And there's more treatments, and whether this remdesivir or however you pronounce it, it's pretty effective. And who knows when we're going to get a vaccine? That's a game changer, obviously.
Yeah, a vaccine will be a game changer. But let's dive into the numbers, because I know our careers as virologists would be short. But let's look at just the numbers, and let's look at the numbers in general. Do you think we're marching towards the new normal for gun sales monthly? I believe that we are, Larry. And I think that's the most encouraging, interesting thing in all this. I think we're looking more at 2 to 2.5 million a month. And it's because I explained this to somebody. Typically when somebody goes out and buys a gun, a first-time gun buyer, we all know the stats. They end up becoming multiple gun buyers. But they tend not to want to give that right up. It's not something they say, oh, I bought a gun. I don't really feel I need it anymore. COVID's over. I'm just going to hand it to the government. This is going to change things, Larry. And do you feel like we're moving towards the new normal? And that's what's going to really shape how we approach things. I think, you've brought up, and you guys have done studies, the large growth in the black community and brown community in terms of gun owners, but also the women's community has always been coming strong. Is this going to be the new normal? I think we froze you. I think Larry froze. No, you're back. You're back. Go ahead.
You there?
Yeah, if you heard. Yeah.
Okay. So if you go, I was pulling a max headroom. So if you look at the NICS data going back many years, you'll see that there's been growth over time. We've had these run-ups like 08, 12, 16, and now in 20. Generally, it's driven by political dynamics. This is a little different because it's driven by concern for public safety first, and food insecurity first because of COVID, and then the whole defund the believable. And so, I think as we get into November, the political motivation will increase. If people perceive that there's going to be a change and a threat to their rights, which is what always happens. But I do think you've got, 2.5 million plus first-time gun buyers just since the beginning of the year, right? 40% of them are women. And as we mentioned, more diversity, demographics are changing, more Asians, more African-Americans, more Hispanics. And the demographics of the buyer are changing as literally the face of America is changing.
Right.
And I think, as you say, someone buys a gun for the first time, a large percentage of them will buy a second gun or will take up target shooting or hunting. It's a little bit like golf, right? People get into playing golf and they get one putter, then they get a second putter, then they get a different driver. Or people that ski, well, you have one ski for, ice, you have one ski for powder, you have one ski for, rocks and things like that. So or fishing. People have different fishing poles. So that is pretty normal, right? And I think we'll see that. But what's important is that you have a generation of fence sitters who became first-time gun buyers, and this is causing the anti-gun groups to lose their mind. I mean, because when it came right down to it, people decided to side on with the Second Amendment to protect themselves and their family. And we saw lots of stories about how many of these first-time buyers were either agnostic or even pro-gun control, and then they encountered all the laws and regulations they never paid attention to before,
right?
And are saying, "Hey, wait a second, this is nuts." Well, in California, why do I have to wait 10 days to get the firearm? I need it now to protect myself. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I passed the background check. What do you mean I have to wait 10 days? You say, well, this is what your government has done to you. So hopefully these people stay aware and involved, and come November, they gun vote and take that into consideration. Don't just blindly support all these gun control laws that come from the left that do nothing to make our communities safer and just really infringe upon our liberties and freedom.
I think, Larry, that we're now, again, let's say I work at the Donahue Institute for a minute, and I have some level of intelligence, but I think we're moving towards an era and a place where you have many pro-life Republicans, but you also have a lot of pro-choice Republicans, right? So that becomes like a hot button trigger thing for a lot of people on the right. And I think we're marching towards the same thing with firearms. I think you're going to have a very large block now of people willing to identify as pro-2A Democrats. I think that's where we're going, and that's what scares the shit out of the left, in my opinion, because I think that what you're going to have is a large block of people that are like, look, I want to protect myself. I want to exercise my right. I want to own a gun, but I still might, be that little D Democrat. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's what's going to cause that middle, and that's where essentially people are going to live and breathe. Now, I get it. I understand it because not everybody's going to be hard to the left or hard to the right on every issue. People are going to have their middle of the road. I think this is creating that middle, and I think what it's going to create is a little trouble in understanding the data. And that's what's going to cause angst in this election. I can't see how Biden can bang the drum of being anti-gun, and I think first of all, I don't think he's going to win, because I don't think his mental incompetency is just way too off the charts right now. And I just don't see people inherently don't want to elect a weak leader. It just doesn't vibe with them. But separately, if his team goes after the guns, there's too much data they don't know anything about. And like you said, there's 2.5 to 3 million potential voters out there that may have flipped and now be pro-2A people.
Mm-hmm. Well, back in the late 90s, 2000, at the national level, the Democratic Party attacked the Second Amendment. And it cost them the election in 2000. It probably cost Kerry his election as well. And then for many, many years, until fairly recently, at the national level, the Democrats, didn't really pursue gun control aggressively, and they were able to get, conservative Democrats elected in rural areas. I mean, Rahm Emanuel, who was one of the architects of the Clinton gun control policy, went out and recruited pro-gun Democrats, and he flipped the House. So only more recently have the Democrats decided they think that this is a winning issue for them again. I think they're making a big mistake. I think what happened in New York with the Attorney General suing to dissolve the NRA is going to backfire and rally Second Amendment advocates, to gun vote come November, leaving aside whatever the other allegations are. To dissolve the organization, to me, is a really strategic blunder politically. You see that reflected in op-eds and editorials across the board, even by liberal folks who don't like the NRA. I think that was a mistake, and I agree. And so I hope that come November, people realize that the Second Amendment is not a Republican issue. It's not a Democrat issue. The breakdown really is always, as I've said, it breaks down between rural and urban, with the suburbs and the exurbs kind of in the middle. Just carefully on a number of the Senate races, you can see how the Democrats in those races are trying to downplay their prior support for gun control. And there's no better example of that than Arizona, where Mark Kelly, the husband of Gabby Giffords, one of the co-founders of the Gifford Gun Control Group, is running against Martha McSally, and he has the Democrat nomination. And you can never find a word on his website about his prior support for gun control.
Right. I think you're right.
And all of this. So they're trying to camouflage their record on that because they know in places like Arizona, in places like Colorado, in places like Maine, in North Carolina, in Georgia, where there are critical Senate races that will decide, Iowa too, that will decide the outcome of the Senate and presidential race. It is not smart politics to tout gun control. Second Amendment advocates are single issue voters. That's what makes the NRA powerful. It's not money. It's the fact that they can turn out motivated, dedicated voters who will vote on that single issue. And it's because people are motivated to protect their rights. And the gun control community, they want to take your rights away from you. And so the people on the side of the Second Amendment are far more motivated to turn out and vote. And again, I think what has happened in New York is going to be a rallying cry for Second Amendment supporters. Even people who might be upset at what has gone on or alleged to have gone on at the NRA will see the attempt to dissolve the NRA as an egregious attack on the Second Amendment to silence the voice of over 5 million gun owners in the United States. Going into this critical election is a big mistake. And I think price.
I agree, and I agree with everything you said. It's well said. I think as we go forward, it's going to be a matter of, as we talked about before and offline, it's going to be a matter of trumpeting the FFLs and making sure the FFL stays strong and stays that you guys have done as a team, and your team has worked really hard to keep the doors open of a lot of these gun stores. And I know you've shelled out a lot of money when in legal fees fighting these battles. Have they all played out how you wanted them to? It seems like you scored a lot of victories in this.
Yeah, I mean, we were very, very pleased. It's a lot of what I worked on early on, and when the pandemic set in, was making sure that Homeland Security listed not just FFLs but ranges as critical infrastructure and as essential, so that they could remain open. Most governors follow that guidance, and in fact, some governors were ahead of Homeland Security, like in Illinois, in Connecticut, and these are not pro-gun governors, but they agreed to let the stores stay open. And in part, one of the arguments we made to Homeland Security is because most law enforcement agencies and officers acquire their firearms and ammunition from their local FFL.
Of course,
and we had FFLs tell us that their local police department said, "You will remain open because we need to be able to buy firearms and ammunition and other products from you." So a few states did not. We saw that in Pennsylvania. Then they reversed themselves when the litigation was ongoing. Then there was a lawsuit in New Jersey, and Governor Murphy reversed himself. We saw the same thing happen in New Mexico, and then Charlie Baker in Massachusetts. That took a lawsuit before he caved, and the court said, no, you have to let them stay open. And in fact, we saw a number of governors, when confronted with lawsuits, reverse course and allow stores to be open. The first was Murphy, so I coined the phrase, that the governor was pulling a Murphy and reversing himself.
Mm-hmm.
We saw that, in New Mexico, for example. A couple of, were very frustrated by Governor Whitmer in Michigan, who in her, VP audition with every town touted the fact that she kept thousands of gun stores in Michigan closed, denying Second Amendment rights to her citizens. We saw that in New York as well, although it wasn't evenly enforced, because I think Governor Cuomo knew that if he tried to enforce it in places like upstate New York, that wouldn't play very well politically. So we saw that too in some other states where the governors wouldn't formally declare gun stores or ranges as essential, but they didn't try to shut them down, except like in urban areas like Seattle, Portland, Albuquerque, New Mexico. But the rest of the state, the stores stayed open, and law enforcement wanted them open. So we're very pleased with that. It was a big, significant accomplishment for NSSF, to protect our retailer members. And working with ATF, for example, to make sure that if the government required or wouldn't allow people to enter the store, that they would still be able to conduct transactions, at the front door, curbside, so to speak, or drive up. And so ATF, said that could take place. All the same background checks and forms were all still filled out. It just would happen at the front door, not inside the store at the checkout counter, because of concerns about COVID.
Now, I know it falls a little out of the NSSF scope, but I have to bring it up. How much does it pain you and your team to see this whole defund the police move deal with out there across the country, without getting into any specific cases? But it has to pain us as an industry, right? Because not only have they been such huge supporters of the firearms and defense industry in terms of being customers, but they're our family, they're our friends, they're people that we work very closely with. Article the other day, and he said, one of the worst things created was the blue line thing, because it's not a line. It's a matter of public safety, and it's a matter of public protection. And that was an interesting take he had on it. I forget the guy's name. I'll look it up. But, does it pain you as an industry leader and as a guy out in front to see the country go through this and endure this whole defund the police movement?
It certainly bothers me personally and professionally. NSSF has great relationships with law enforcement through, for example, our Project Child Safe, where we've distributed through law enforcement agencies in every state and U.S. territory, over 15,000 agencies, firearm safety education kits through Project Child Safe, which include a free gun lock to promote the message of safe and responsible firearms ownership and storage. So to see the law enforcement attacked for just doing their job, trying to protect the public, is very troubling to me. I think that's going to have an impact in the election. I think a lot of people are concerned about that whole concept of defunding the police, and makes no sense to me. You're right. It's about public safety, and it's that's one of the main drivers. The concern about public safety, that the police aren't going to be there to protect you, is what's driving the spike in sales. Certainly more recently, and I don't see that stopping. Look what happened in Chicago. I mean, someone starts shooting at police, they respond, and they riot in downtown Chicago, smashing in store windows.
Ridiculous.
Without waiting to find out what the facts are. It's very unsettling. And you look, a lot of the police officers have been injured through all this rioting. They're African American, they're women, they're Asians. So this idea that white police officers are suppressing minority communities, I just don't buy into that narrative at all.
Yeah.
And, we have a very long-standing relationship with law enforcement. Every year, NSSF makes a contribution to the Fraternal Order of Police to help, widowers or orphans of police officers who are slain in the line of duty, defending their communities. That's very important to us, because they're not just great customers, obviously, and most law enforcement officers support the Second Amendment and actually support law-abiding citizens having firearms to protect themselves. So that's an important relationship for our industry beyond a customer relationship.
100%. I can't agree with you more. It's sad and it's troubling to see in many ways. And I think it's another poor calculation by the other side, because you can't even get these guys to condemn it. So I think they're going down a rough road. I can give my predictions all day, but everybody's here to hear yours. So I want to ask you one last question, because I know time is getting tight for you. How do you see this playing out, whether it's politically or in the firearms business? Because I believe we're going towards a new normal, and I think companies better ramp up their production, because I do think we're going to stay somewhere in that 2 million new gun buyers for a while. I think we're going to stay in that space for some time. So I'm predicting, and I'm saying to companies, you better ramp up production, because I think we're going to be there for a minute. And I think maybe it might settle down, but I think the new normal is going to be somewhere around 1.5 to 2.5 million new gun owners a month. That's just my belief, because I think people are going to be scared, and they're going to be scared for a while. And I think post-election, regardless of who wins, people are going to continue to buy for a while, well into probably June, July of next year. Maybe then things settle down, maybe things quiet down a little bit. But I see as fast as they stock the shelves is as fast as they're going to empty. And we've already seen an ammo run, the likes of which we've never seen, not post Sandy Hook, not post anything. It's never seen before. So I think we're marching towards it getting, I don't like to say the word worse, because it's quote unquote good for our business, but they're going to have to rethink how they ramp up production and how they do media. Now, how do you see it playing out? And I'll give you the last word on it in all things political and in the industry.
Well, in terms of, as I said before, I think demand is going to continue to be very strong and outpace supply, but it's always difficult to predict when that peak will subside. We were asked about the so-called Trump slump, and I had told reporters time and time again, 2016 was a record year, but everybody understood that at some point, it would subside. It couldn't go on forever. It was, unsustainable. But, we came off of the peak, but the valley floor was much higher. If you go back and look at the data on NICS, right? And that's what I talked about before, the growth in NICS over time. And so I think you're right. I mean, at some point, things will settle back down to a more regular or a new normal, as you say. But I think that valley drive that, the demand, it's hard to predict. But I think most people in the industry expect demand to continue to be strong past the election, no matter the outcome. And Biden wins and the Senate flips, and there's a real push for gun control that they've promised. You'll see a spike again, particularly on modern sporting rifles, because that'll be one of their number one targets. But again, if the Democrats go too far pushing gun control to predict the future, we know exactly, But I think, as we spoke before, the dynamics about public safety, the defund the police, the rioting, which continues in places like Portland and Seattle and Chicago, unnerves people, and that's why they're buying firearms, protect themselves and their family. And I think that come election, I would just advocate to all your listeners, go to gunvote.org, gunvote.org. Stand on the Second Amendment issues. And I think you probably already know, right, the presidential, the Senate races, the House races, even your state races and local races. And then on election day, make sure you don't risk your rights and gun vote. And voting will start in about 3 weeks in some states with absentee ballots and early voting. So, we'll see what happens if Biden gets on the debate stage and how that goes for him. I think that could be a game changer as well. But don't wait. Don't risk your rights. Make sure you're registered to vote. Gunvote.org. Go there, get registered. When you get close to election day, go there to find out where your poll is. Your poll in the history of the United States, it's going to create uncertainty because we will not, I predict, will not know the outcome of the election on election night because of all the mail-in voting that'll take time to process. But don't risk your rights. Gun vote.
It's funny. I'll say this. I think he loses the popular again, but I think he wins the electoral again, and I think we will know the outcome, but not necessarily the grand total. But I think he's just going to win too aggressively in those swing states again. I just don't see how they're going to go the other way. I don't see it, Larry. You know what I mean? I just don't see that happening. I think the mail-in vote thing is troubling, but I think it's a futile attempt. I think, he'll get a ton of votes in those states that we predict he's going to get a ton of votes in. But the reality is, I just think in those swing states it's going to be too hard. I think it's going to be too hard.
The polling the mass media is telling you about now it's not accurate. You can't look at polling until after Labor Day. It's really not accurate. But even in the swing states, the race is already starting to tighten, and I predict it will tighten, and it will be very, very close. I agree. It's likely that Biden wins the popular vote, but that's not how you win, right? It's the Electoral College. That's the way their framers set it up. so that populated states like New York and California can't dominate, right? That's why some Democrats want to do away with the Electoral College,
Of course.
so they can run the table, right? So that's critically important. It'll come down to those swing states, those battleground states like Florida, North Carolina, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Colorado. I mean, everyone knows what they are.
Well,
right. So, particularly if you live in any of those states, it is just critical that, even if you don't think it makes a difference, it does, right? Because Trump won in 2016, only 8,000 votes out of all the votes cast would have made the difference between him winning or losing the Electoral College. So every vote really does matter. Gunvote.org. That's my message, and I'm sticking to it.
It's a good one. Now, I want to say this. You've done a fabulous job. I think it's down to you and Laird Hamlin as to who's kind of the front runner and the voice of the industry. I think you've done an amazing job, you and your team, putting information out there. You answered the call of duty the first time. We had a podcast and fired back at me. I can appreciate the ground game that you guys are putting together and what you're trying to do and sticking to your guns and sticking a SHOT Show. I think it's really, no pun intended on that. But in reality, I think we need somebody to hold their ground and say, no, we're doing this. This is going forward. This is going to happen, barring the state not allowing it to happen. And I think that's the right approach. And I think, for the most part, it's refreshing to see somebody being the dad in the room, so to speak, and somebody step up and take a leadership role, Larry. And it means a lot because, not a lot of guys right now are willing to get in front of a microphone, willing to have the conversation, willing to put the information out there and say, nope, this is where we are and this is what we're going to do. And you've answered the call every time, so my hat's off to you for that. Nobody can take that away from you and your team and what you guys have done. I'm looking forward to it and how it plays out. Let everybody know who's listening, where they can find more information, how they can stay up to date, and how they can stay tuned in to everything you guys are doing, because it's important, to get that information, because people are asking all over, whispering in dark alleys, is this going to happen? Is it not? Where can everybody get more information on what's going on and stay updated?
Well, there's a couple of places. Obviously, the NSSF.org is a great place to go to get information, keep up to date. If you're a SHOT Show exhibitor or attendee, you'll get information from the SHOT Show publications and e-newsletters that we push out. You can sign up for Bullet Points, which is our weekly newsletter, as a great way to keep up to date on what's going on. Or we also put out on Fridays our government relations update on sort of things political, legislative, and otherwise, litigation. So that's another great way to keep up to date. But and listening to shows like yours, where you have important guests unlike me.
Yeah. It goes without saying, I was charged up for this one. I was super excited to have you in. And, I thank you for always taking the time and answering the call. It means a lot. And I can't appreciate the things that you guys do enough. And I think you're one of the more underappreciated organizations, truly, because when this was all going down and FFLs were battling just to keep their doors open, your phone, I know, was melting. So dealing with that and dealing with the AGs, you're the most hated man in the gun business, according to attorney generals, I'm sure, across the country. So that's that's a nice bullseye to have on you, and it says you're willing to step up and take the shots, so to speak. So I appreciate you for that.
I'll happy to wear that target. If I can make just one pitch to your audience, if your local gun store that you go to isn't an NSSF member, could you please tell them they need to join NSSF because there's strength in numbers, and we do so much for retailers, whether members or not, like keeping them open. So I would encourage your listeners, make sure that the gun store that they frequent is an NSSF member. And if they're not and won't join, go find an NSSF member and support their business.
100%. And to any FFL that has any questions, they cannot hesitate to reach out to me or reach out directly to the NSSF team. They're pretty prompt about getting back to people, about it, walking them through that process. So I think that that's really critical and important. And I'm looking forward to a surprising turnout at SHOT. And I think you're going to see a big rallying cry, because I do think a lot of this dissipates for a minute, because at some point the Democrats are going to have to reevaluate their strategy and what they're doing and how they're attacking if this doesn't pan out and we get a referendum. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting how it plays out, Larry. I'm looking forward to it. I can't thank you enough. I can't thank the NSSF enough and your team. They do a fabulous job from the top down. Everything that they do is greatly appreciated by the industry, and just keep it up. I mean, I'm all about supporting those that are willing to get out in the front and have the conversation, so it means a lot. And I appreciate you, Larry, and I appreciate everybody. And I want to put all the links down below for Larry and for the NSSF. Go check them out. Check this out everywhere podcasts are heard. Please leave a review. I want to thank all the sponsors: Gallo Technologies, Rhino Metals, Blackwater Ammunition, Galco Holsters, Riton Optics, and of course, I can't forget to thank Kenzies Optics as well too. Appreciate them. Appreciate everybody that supports the industry and everybody that's out at the front lines. Go check out everything the NSSF is doing. I appreciate Larry and his team, and we're out.